Hello everyone, we're doing the hug, Jinho is going to go first and talk to you about cops. Take it away. I don't have anything else to say.
He's cool.
Thank you.
Yay!
All right, thank you for coming tonight. Let me start my presentation. The title is A Grandma's Home Recipe for the Ultimate Meatball. And this is our grandma. And my name is Jinho Jeoung. I'm a 3D software developer at SideFX. I joined here last year. And for my background, I studied painting, and also I studied mathematics. And my subject was hyperbolic geometry and homogeneous dynamics. And I mostly work on Copernicus. So before we go to the main topic, let me briefly introduce what Copernicus is. Copernicus is 2D and 3D GPU image processing framework, and we can do various things. The first thing we can do is texturing. You can see the left image. And the second thing we can do is basic compositing and image editing. And also, we can do simulations. This is based on Flow Solver, which is H21's new node. And I heard among our audience today, there are people who just started to learn Houdini. So if you want to learn Houdini, you can go our website, and there are learning paths, and you can choose free tutorials, and welcome. And also, if you are new to Copernicus, there is also Copernicus tutorials. So just set the category as Copernicus, and you can find many tutorials. And let's go to texturing. Like other network in Houdini, texturing in Copernicus is also procedural. And also, one benefit of working texturing in Copernicus is connectivity with other workflows, so you can do whatever you want by your context. And let's go to our ultimate meatball. So this is the meatball. My basic goal was just making something very gross, disgusting, and also organic. And it's some references. This one is from Butcher Shop, and I studied roughness and specular. This is not human heart, this is pig heart. And also there are some undisplayable images, which is medical images, but I don't want to make you shocked. But I studied base color and subsurface scattering parameters with those images. And let's go to material overview. And this material consists of 8 different texture layers. And the height layer is the heart of everything. So from the height layer, we can make other layers like normal, roughness, specular, subsurface scattering amount. But they are very straightforward from height layer. And also, coloring is done by height layer. So once coloring is done, then we can set subsurface scattering radius and color layers. So in this presentation, I will deal with only height and color layers with details. And also, when I started to learn textual work, I studied a lot of this documentation, which is Material X standard surface bob node documentation. And one good thing in this document is that every texture layers like this, they are all parameters in this bob node. So you can see a lot of examples by various parameter values. So it's a very good asset. And speaking of which, let's briefly see what each texture layer does. So height layer does this displacement. So if you see the image on the right side, then it actually deforms the geometry mesh. And normal layer give some fake shading by light. So if you see here, there's no geometry deformation, but only shadings. And roughness changes the amount of micro bumps. So when it goes higher, like 1, then you can see there's very matte material. And specular changes the intensity or amount of reflection on the surface. So it ended up with very glossy material. So this is comparison between height layer and combined layer. And color layer is done by height layer. So, and also we want to study subsurface scattering layers. And those are images from the office. I took everything. For subsurface scattering layer, it's very important to organic materials. So this is my ear, but you can see light behind my ear. So subsurface scattering allows material with light passing the surface. So, and it's not just organic materials. So plastic, marble, they also very good example of subsurface scattering parameters. So those are comparison between layers. So if you see the amount is larger than 0, then you can actually feel translucent surface here. And also subsurface scattering color, they define color inside the surface. So in this image, the color is the default color of our preview material node, which is pure red. But subsurface scattering color is once set, then you can see a bit yellowish colors on each blister. And subsurface scattering radius, you can think it defines the thickness of the surface. So we will see the other example, then it's going to be more clear. It's going to be clearer. So for comparison, I say base color with pure white, and these parameters are subsurface scattering amount and radius scale. When they are all 0, then you can see pure white material. But when they are all 1, then you can see very whitish surface with reddish inside. But when subsurface radius scale is smaller than 1, then you can see it's a bit more reddish. So you can consider it, this small value actually defines some thickness of the surface itself. So this is comparison between color textures. So one interesting thing is that maybe the left image, the example with only color layer, may remind of you some games like Dead Space. That's because in games, real-time simulation is very important, but subsurface scattering simulation takes some resources, so it's not suitable for real-time simulation. But our goal is just making something very gross and disgusting organic material, so I'm going to use subsurface scattering parameters. So in this material, the height layer consists of 3 major parts, from veins to flesh, and I will explain each object, and then after height is done, I will explain color layer. And there's one more thing, grammar secret ingredient, Distort node. So Distort node is COP node, and in this workflow, source layer is Wally noise, so this is going to be distorted by Distort node, and directions should be given because we want some information of the direction of distortion. And then if you are equipped with those 2 nodes, then you are ready to do distortion. And so to define directions, slope direction is very important in this workflow, but it's not the only way to define directions. But I will stick to slope direction. And understanding slope direction is quite useful. So slope direction has 3 parameters. The first parameter is angle. And I could say angle is the most important parameter because angle changes the profile of deformation. So if you see the left image, this is UV image from slope direction, and this is the final distortion given by distort node. So when angle changes, you can see the shape of deformation is also changed. And scale defines the length of vectors or directions on this image, but consequently you will get scaling. But distort node also has scaling, so you probably don't need this parameter. And corner size, you can think it's a sort of smoothing parameter. So when corner size goes higher, you can see both images go smoother. And this is another visualization of slope direction. So this is the result of slope direction, but I visualized it with arrows. So when the default status is angle is set by 0, and you can see all arrows, they are radially aligned. So consequently, you will have expansion and contraction deformations. But when angle is set by 90, then every vectors, they are rotated by slope direction. So consequently, you will have swirling, rotating deformations. And this is comparison between angle parameters. So source image is checkerboard, and you can see some deformation like contracting and expanding here. But if you see the 90-degree angle, then you can see spiral shapes. And let's go to our main topic, veins. So this is the rendered image. And to generate the veins, I used the whirly noises. And also I wanted to add some natural feeling, so I used distort node with fractal noise and slope direction. And this is images at each node. So I started with whirly noise as my source layer, but you can see it has quite organic cells, but the boundaries, they are very uniform, and I don't like it because it's not organic. So I used the distort node, and this is the result. And you can see it has a bit more organic feeling. But this is not enough. Like here's grandma's tip. In nature, many shape consists of fractal shape. What I mean by fractal is repeated shape. But nature is not mathematics. So at each step of fractal iteration, there should be some deformation. So you can see this is tree nerve and leaf nerve, and this is delta, and this is tree. They all have repeated shape with some deformations. So I just followed this idea, and then those are repeated layers with deformations. So in the workflow like this, you can use scatter shapes and invoke block with iteration parameter, but it's just a matter of your choice by your purpose. So you can choose whatever you want. And usually in this kind of iteration workflow, 2 or 3 repeats are enough. And I blended all the layers, but the result layer has very uniform height, and I also don't like it because this is uniform, so which is not so organic. So I multiplied with 1 fractal noise, and this is the result. So it has some variation on height. And let's go to flash. This is the result layer, result image. And in this workflow, there is nothing special. Like I used 2 bubble noises, and bubble noise is also new node in H21, and it has very nice organic profile, so I didn't need any special deformation. So the first bubble noise has large elemental size, and the second one has small elemental size, and I just blended all together. So this is combined material with veins, so you can see some bumps here. And let's go to blisters. So this is the final image. So in this workflow, scatter shapes are very important. So scatter shape can replicate source layer with some variations like size or rotation or some jitter. So I used ramp mono to make hemisphere like height layer. So this is my source image, and with some variations, and I used the scatter shapes, and then I added distort node. That's because the source layer looks so uniform, so I wanted to add some deformations. And this is comparison. So without distort, you can see it's very fine shaped, it's very smooth, but with distort, there will be some details like this. And this is the first shape scatter shapes, and this is the second scatter shapes. And then after I blended it, this is the result of distortion. So you can see some details at the edge. And also, this blister layer will be added on flash layer. So I pre-added flash layer. So if you see the inside of each blister, there's slight difference, and they will add more naturality. And this is the result so far. And let's go to cells. This is extra detail. It's not real cells, but you will see what it means. So without this step, then you can see those highlights. They are very soft and very not uniform, but you can see it's like very like soft, yeah. But when you see the right side, you will see like a lot of crispy details. Not even here, like there are many details compared to without cell displacement. So it can add more naturality and more details like this. And in this workflow, there's nothing special. I only used one Wally noise with small element size. And then, as I mentioned before, Wally noise has just 2 uniform boundary everywhere. So I used the distort node with roughness, some sort of roughness. So this is the result. And then height is done. Let's go to coloring. So in procedural coloring in Copernicus, mono to RGB is almost everything. So when you plug your mono layer, which is height layer in our case, then you can color the layer with ramp parameter. But coloring everything with only one mono to RGB layer is quite difficult process. So you may need to separate each object. So after coloring each object and blending all together, there are all key techniques in procedural coloring. And I started with my flash layer and blister layer. And this is the source image, which is the final height layer. And I applied curvature node, which is H21's new node. Then there will be some soft boundaries like this based on curvature. And then I remapped it. And based on remapped result, I colored flash color layer, and also I added darkening layer for some details. So those outlines, they are all from darkening layers. And then I colored veins, and also I wanted to add some details of blood stain on flesh. So those two layers, they are also nothing special. I used fractal noise to color variation, and then if I blend all together, then finally I got the final color result. And then this is combine the result with height and color, and we are done. And let me briefly introduce LOPS and rendering in this process. So usually I start my COP network inside sub network. So in this Geo1, I have my COP material network, and this is for post modification. So it has only translation and scaling, but you can use more complicated post modification for your geometry with material. And if you go to LOPNet, then you can use scene import node. Then you can bring your geometry with material. So you can see the viewport is changed to Karma viewport. And once you have Karma viewport, it's very good to figure out your final material. And this is comparison between rendered image and Karma viewport. So it has some difference in details, but it's still very good approximation. And this is my window when I work on texture. So it's quite difficult to figure out each parameter change in our 3D viewport. For example, like this is after subsurface scattering parameter is added, then you can't see subsurface scattering parameter in 3D viewport. But in Karma viewport, you can see the difference. So this is one example of using Karma viewport during texture artwork. And then in LOPNet, I created a simple background by using subcreate. And I set 3-point lighting for each geometry. And then I used light linker to separate light by each geometry. And then I used AP tag to generate light AOVs for my final EXR file. That's for post-process. And then after rendering, we get the result. This is the result, Meatball. And this is not the everything. So in H21, there are many new COP nodes, and I chose some of them to produce example images and example materials. In this example, I used the hyperbolic tile. Hyperbolic tile can generate complicated pattern. And to generate this tile pattern, I used two hyperbolic tiles, and to make these broken details on each tile, I used Distort node. And in this organic example, I used two phasor noise to make these bone-like shapes, and to spread out these blood sacs, I used scatter shapes. And in this military pattern, the first coloring was done by fractal noise and mono 2 RGB node, and then I applied pixelate to make quantized pattern. And in this lava example, for my base layer, I used bubble noise, and then to generate these fluid-like deformations, I use the swirl node. And those examples will be uploaded on our content library soon. And we just, so only very example materials, but you can create scenes with cup materials. So this is one scene with only cup materials. So hyperbolic tile is mostly used for those eggs. And in this scene, only cloud was generated in SOP, and all others, they are generated in cup. If you use preview material in cup, you can generate simple geometry like grid, cube, sphere, or torus. And then if you use height layer and opacity layer, then you can create more interesting geometry. So I used only fractal noise for this base terrain. And in this example, I used Electra and Vellum Solver to create those three objects. And I used left tree generator to generate those dead trees. And of course, every materials are generated in cups. And that's pretty much of it. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes.
So how long did that take you to make the meatball texture?
Maybe 2 or 3 days.
What about the lava texture?
I think each material is like 2 or 3 days. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Come on, guys, don't make the young one.
Yes?
What's the logic behind the hyperbolic tile texture? Is there like specific types of formulas or?
Yeah, it has a formula. It was actually my major when I was studying PhD. It's using what we call Mobius transformation. So it's assuming our cup base space, which is XY plane, as complex plane, and then it uses reflection and it's a long time ago. I forgot the name. Reflection and complex version of reflection, and then yeah, it's just iteration of those metrics, like Mobius transformations. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that a new one in 21?
It's in 21. You can use it. Yeah.
What's your most used nodes for your comp workflow, like Distort or the specific domains?
I think fractal noise is my favorite one. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you usually use a distort node to make a variation, or what is the other node that you use to create like a variation of the regions?
Basically, Distort node is, I think it's always good choice to make very like variation with many profiles. But I recently figured out that like flow solver is also very nice to have variation, but it's essentially similar to Distort node using slope direction. But yeah, like I'm also like beginner as like making some texture work, so I have to do some experiments. But so far, Distort node is my favorite variations. Yeah. Yes.
And the most of the result, is it based on the UV map, or so have you tried with the triplanar or hex triplanar?
I tried one time before. Yeah, it works quite well. So, and also every texture procedurally generated in curve is tileable. So that's one benefit, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Any more questions? Thank you.
Dmitrii, our second presenter of the night. He will be talking about trains. Choo choo.
Let's go!
Oh, all right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here for November T Rain Train. Yeah, thank you. There was someone left. Just before we continue into like main topic, a little bit about myself. So like I'm not just like train guy. I have a name. My name is Dmitrii. I've been born and raised in Ukraine. Moved to Canada about 3 years ago. Something happened, and now I'm 3D artist at SideFX, which is great. Specifically, what is 3D artist at SideFX? We create a bunch of different demo materials and files for sneak peek and content library. Here you can see some of the stuff I did with some of the other external help. A bunch of other projects are collaborative, so I'm not taking all the fame here. So yeah, that's about it. So let's just rip it apart and finally talk about the train. So here's the final sequence. This is GIF, just for this super crazy transition to work. So let me just switch to actual video. Yeah, so we have this daylight scene of the train zooming through desert, a lot of stuff, assets. We're going to talk about everything. And the same idea, but just at night. Some little compositing trick, giant moon, because of course. And yeah, the same idea, just at night. Just before we go, there's going to be a lot of stuff here. If you miss something and you feel like, you know, oh, what's happening, this project is already available online on the content library. You can just go to SideFX/content library and train scene, and you just get it for free. And I just want to, you know, make extra sure it's for Houdini 21, so it won't work in 20.5. I mean, it will work, but like some stuff will be broken naturally. So please use it in Houdini 21. Another note. The train itself, the rig, and the whole idea of this project as essence. The rig itself was done by Henry Dean and Michnia Stoika, two very talented artists, and they created this very great Apex rigged train, as well as some R&D for tracks and stuff. But unfortunately, I didn't get enough time to create a final render. So I was the one responsible for the final render and look dev, because this train, this asset really is, you know, you should support it with a nice looking image. And reference. We'll need some references, and you know, right now everyone's like, oh, AI, ML, big data, whatever. So I decided to use some Stable Diffusion, generate some references, and they look kind of, you can see, finicky. Maybe I wasted some water on this, especially on this one, because like that's not how it should be, right? So, but it was like just like a general vibe of like kind of mountains and very vast majority of like lands and the lonely train just going through. So that's what we did. So it was like a while ago. It was like in the beginning of this year. Also, I should thank Jeff Gooding for the lovely simulation of the smoke. The issue with the scene, you can see like it looks okay, but the main issue with the scene, if you really open it inside, it's not very optimized. There were a lot of things that weren't great, and just the way I designed the structure of the scene wasn't great. So I decided to just do it again. We can do it again. It's fine. So around like a month ago, I gathered new reference. This time without any AI-generated images. I just went to Google Earth, and I found this very nice stretch of Arizona road somewhere near Salt Lake City, I think, or Phoenix. I don't know really geography. But the thing is, you can see nice lonely highway, bunch of mountains. Even though it's like desert area, it's still a bunch of plants, which will become assets. And it looks kind of cool, and the sky as well, like a very nice cloudy sky. So a lot of things here. So straight away, I just got the image of the area as my texture, and I also find a elevation data of the area. You can easily find multiple resources to get satellite height data from area of your interest. And luckily for us, inside Houdini, there's actually a node called HeightField file, which will expect some of the elevation data, just like PNG picture, and it will create the HeightField based on that. So here you can see I roughly scaled it to be kind of close to the actual real world example. So it's around like 8,000 units in like width. And the scale, the like exposure of that picture, I just also like eyeball it pretty much. But you can see it's a very nice head start. It's already looking fine. There are some small issues we need to fix. First of all, because the image from internet is full of artifacts, you can see we have this compression kind of line, which we need to smooth out. And we will use HeightField mask by feature. Then I'll add just a bunch of noises to kind of fix overall blurriness of the area. Those noises are extremely tiny, super tiny, but it's very important to have them just to have some elevation difference. Later on, we're going to do flow masks. And for a flow mask to work correctly, you need some of the difference to be there. And the final step, just to add a little bit of erosion, which is newly added in Houdini 21, updated one. And you can see we went from something that looks like this to something that looks like that, which is, again, nothing special. For mountains in the background, should do the trick. So I just went with that. Now for the material. For the material of the terrain, I could have just applied like one single texture, or I could have like created a setup to have some masks, for example, if I want to have different textures and different like proximity to the terrain. But what I decided to do, I decided to grab my camera and create 3 materials and switch between those materials based on the camera distance. So basically that's what happened here. Like right here, you can see like the 3 lines. Those are actually 3 different materials in one terrain, and we switch between each of them by distance from the camera, from the ray distance. So to get that distance, we can actually call ray hit dist thingy using Karma ray import node. This will just give us very nice gradients of values that basically like each pixel on your screen will just bake the value how far away that each pixel from the camera. Right now everything is super white because like everything is beyond 1 unit away, so we just clamp everything to white. But after some remaps, you can see here I need to input like quite a huge value. After some remaps, now you can see some masks. And just by combining those masks, you can build some textures and switch between those textures using those masks. So that's what's happening here. But you can see those textures are not scaled properly. So to scale them properly and to make sure there's no repetitiveness in the texture, we can use texture coordinate input for our material X image node. And specifically what we'll try to do, we don't want to have any repetitiveness, as I mentioned before. We'll try to create this texture bombing effect, which is pretty easy in material X. All you have to do is pretty much sample your world position and create a bunch of noises and just randomize it. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I got my noise. I get my texture coordinates in the world using this node here. And I just multiply one by another, have this little gradient. I create this UV position map out of the gradient, and I'll use it to randomize my texture. And now you can see here, I hope you can see, it's a little bit like different shade of green, but this different shade of green is actually a different material. So when I zoom in, we have green high definition material, which is designed to be very close to the camera, close to the train. And then when I zoom out, I have, 1K, even less texture that is like, I don't really care, less definition, no displacement, and so far and so forth. So that's for the material. Now we can do our assets. For the assets, of course, I use Polyhaven because, that's the place to go. So I'm not gonna, again, Polyhaven is great, but you get it. So I got a bunch of different vegetations, barks, plants as a USD format, which is very great because Polyhaven can ship USD files, which is awesome. But for my specific purposes of my project, I needed to alter that a little bit. So here you can see I got my bark asset from Polyhaven. It already composed out of 4 variants. So my plan is to have it more organized structurally. So what I'll do straight away for each asset, I'll create a path attribute. So just using this real wrangler here, I'll create this path. So even though it maybe looks scary, but it's literally just /root/ the name of the asset. And then I'll create 2 variants of each bark. So one bark will be extremely poly reduced, and I'll add proxy to my path. And the second one will be the original one, unchanged, will have render to this path. And by the end of this network, this little loop, now technically I have 8 assets, 4 of them proxy, 4 of them render. And we can clearly see it if we imported everything to LOPNet. If we look at our scene graph path, we have our root, which is our primitive, head primitive, and all the other barks exist underneath. And each bark has a proxy and render variant. And for now, Karma doesn't really know what's proxy and render, and you probably also don't know what's the purpose of that. So the idea behind proxy and render geometries is that you'll have your proxy geometry only in your viewport, and you'll switch to render geometry when rendering. And that's very convenient when you want to have a vast environment with a bunch of assets, but you don't want to give up on a viewport performance. So that's what this is useful for. And you have to tell Karma which asset is what. So you'll create configure primitive node, and you'll say my render to be render and my proxy to be proxy. Very straightforward. And now my idea is to create a variant, basically create one USD asset which will have a variant of itself. So for that, as you remember before, we have all the assets under one primitive. I'll graft each asset as a separate entity. So each bark will be going separate using this graphed branch node. And I'll add it back to my empty primitive, which contains just the name of the bark. And I'll use add variant node to add that primitive to that empty primitive as a variant of itself. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but the idea, after you run this little network, you can see now we have only one bark in the network. And in our graph path, we only have one bark as well. But now when we create a set variant node, for example, we can actually select all our variants there. So now it's just one asset with the 4 variants living inside. And we can also examine it inside metadata. So you can see there's a variant variable, and each bark, it's all stored there. And basically, just to summarize, for visual learners as well, we have one USD asset, which is composed of 4 variants of itself, and each variant has a render and proxy variant inside. And all of that done, again, like it sounds scary, but it's pretty much like 6 nodes or whatever. And that's the power of Houdini and USD and Solaris in general. And you'll say, okay, this is great. We got a little network, something's happening, whatever, I don't know. But what if I have, 6,000 assets? Are you gonna go through and change all those like names and paths by your hand? Like it's not, it's not really cool. So for that, I have an answer for you. Top network. Every time you need to automate anything inside Houdini, you'll probably use top network. And before we go inside top network, and I'll show you those little things there, we just need to analyze what kind of data we're working with. So right now I have this long path. You shouldn't care about this little long path. The idea is that I have polyhaven folder, all my assets inside the polyhaven folder, as you can see here. Each asset, the folder with each asset actually has its own name. So asset named bark debris will be in a folder called bark debris. And inside we have a texture folder with a bunch of textures and the USD file itself. So now knowing that, we'll go back to top network. We'll create file pattern nodes, and we will put the file types to directories only. And we will search for all the folders inside polyhaven folder. So basically what will happen, it will fetch each name of each folder inside the polyhaven folder and create this little work item for each of them. Basically like as a separate entity, as a separate line of thinking. As you can see here, it will also create a bunch of attributes for us for free. So if you middle mouse button on every work item, you will see we have a directory, which is a path to each folder we're fetching. And there's also a name of the folder we're fetching, which is already great because that's exactly what we need to have, because that's the name of our asset. So we can actually go ahead and just save that as an attribute. So you create attribute create node, and you just say, okay, my file name intrinsic attribute that Houdini gave you for free, please map it to my asset name attribute. So now you can see we have asset name, which is the same as my file name there. I'll do the same for the material. Right now, you can see they're just exactly the same. And I'll erase this like suffix with the underscore 1K, because the way material textures are named in the texture folder, they don't really have this in the namings, so we just erase it. And now we need to save the path to the actual asset, so we can compose it with the intrinsic attribute that just points into each folder, which is PDG input, and then the asset name attribute we just created before, dot USDC. Pretty straightforward. Now we have the model path, which contains the actual pointer to every USD asset we have in our network of the folders. And I'll do the same with the texture folder. So I'm not even fetching all my textures separately. I'm just fetching my folder because that's enough. And that's it. It was a little bit scary, I know, but now we have pretty much 4 new attributes we can use. So we have the name of the asset, we have the name of the texture, of the material, we have the path to the texture folder, we have a path to actual USD asset. So now if I go back, all we have to do is just change all those paths that were like hard-coded before to our attributes. So for example, my USD import file, which was pointing to specific bark asset, now will point to model path attribute, which will contain basically all my assets in it inside. My material, when I create my name and my paths, I will also now refer to asset name as an attribute. And I'll do the same for materials as well in the network, in the LOPS network. But now the last thing, which is very important for the assets, is asset material. And the lucky thing about those specific assets from Polyhaven is, remember, like the bark geometry was the 4 variants, right? All of those variants, they actually share the same texture, which is very handy. So you can see here, those are actually 4 different variants of a bark, and it's only one texture file, which is great, which means we can just put our material library inside our loop, and we don't really care what kind of texture we're plugging in. We don't really have to put it like outside, whatever. It's pretty straightforward, so thank you, Polyhaven, for this. But stop. There's a little issue, because of course there's a little issue. Nothing works as smoothly as you would anticipate. There's some things you have to double check and solve, and some issues and roadblocks, which is unfortunate, but there is a small issue which we forgot to mention before. Some of the textures you can see here, they have some extensions. Other textures, they'll have different extensions, which is unfortunate. So you can see here, for example, we have diffusion texture, which is JPEG, and different folder with the different assets. Diffusion texture will be PNG. And you can technically go back to top network. Instead of fetching just folders, you'll fetch every single diffusion texture, and you will assign, blah, blah, it'll take forever. There is a little trick you can do. Basically, in your material, you'll be searching for everything. Like you'll try to fetch EXR, PNG, and JPEG, and you just add them together. So the idea here is, you can see my file name, I'm just fetching whatever in the folder. If there's, for example, here you can see I'm trying to find an EXR diffusion map. If it's not there, my default color will be 0. So the output of the node will be nothing, right? So I'm adding nothing plus the actual texture, and my output is just the actual texture, which is great. We solved the small issue. We didn't have to go to top network and create a bunch of stuff there. But unfortunately, again, there's a little thing like transparency. So some assets, they actually have transparent maps, while other assets, they don't have anything. They're just opaque. And the thing is, if I do the same little trick, I'll return 0 on the opaque asset. It will become transparent because it has to be 1 by default to be opaque. And we can also solve this without any top networks, just a little bit of like trickery, I guess. I mean, that's why it's called Houdini, right? So what I'll do, I'll try to do the same, but instead of making my default color to be 0, it'll be 1. So now, let's say I have actual transparency in my asset, so it's some sort of plant with like transparent texture. So this guy will return transparent texture, like the actual file. This guy will return 1. This one will return 1. I will add everything together. I have transparency plus 1. I'm subtracting 2 right here. I'm just subtracting 2. We're back to just square 1. We're back to just one single transparency picture. If I have no transparency maps whatsoever, everything returns 1. The value overall is 3. I'm subtracting 2 again. And I have the value 1, which is perfect. That's exactly what I need for my opaque opaque objects to work. So now it's going to be just 1, and everything works again. Again, it's kind of, again, like you don't really have to. You can go back to top network and fetch everything. But I don't really, it just takes a lot of time. Some trickery always kind of works. So yeah, to finalize, I also added this little Usergroup down there. And now my top network has everything inside. So I can just cook it, all my assets, all my textures, everything will be just cooked automatically and as safe as a USD file to my disk, which is really great. Well, so now, as we got our materials and assets and other stuff, we can finally talk about scattering. So if we go back to Google Maps for a second, you can see here there are a bunch of those little lines. If you look closely, those lines are actually a bunch of plants. So I think the idea here, I think that's what, I'm not a geologist or whatever, but I think what's happening, rain goes down those mountains, and the rainwater kind of slowly flows down the hill, and plants love water, so they just grow next to it. And you can see actually plants that are closer to streams are bigger, and plants that are in between are smaller. So that's pretty much the whole logic behind this like whole environment. And we can easily recreate it inside Houdini. And for that, as I mentioned before, we'll use HeightField flow field node. So after cranking up the iteration to quite a huge number and waiting for like a minute or so, you'll have this very beautifully looking kind of stream texture of different rivers and stuff, just kind of combining together and looking very naturalistic. And what I will do, I will expand this mask and subtract one from another just to find the difference, basically to find the outline of each of this little stream. And I'll use that mask to generate a bunch of points using HeightField scatter node. So now we have a bunch of particles we can use. And the cool thing about HeightField scatter node, it'll also get you a p-scale attribute and orient attribute. So when you scatter some, as I did here, just like some cubes for reference, you can see they all kind of different scale and they all kind of positioned a bit differently, which is great. And we'll just do the same for smaller plants in between. So I just invert my mask, multiply a bunch of noises on top to make it less uniformal, and the same HeightField scatter node. And you can see now we have even more plants, which are now cubes, proxies in between. And the thing is, because we have all our USD assets exported and we know the path for each USD asset, we can actually specifically point from each particle which kind of USD asset we'll be using for scattering. So usually when you scatter assets, you just scatter them randomly, but this time I wanted to have more control. So what I do, I just create different group masks and select different amount of points. And for each kind of bucket of points, I will create a path attribute which will point to USD assets we just exported. So as you can see here, we just create this path attribute here. And the cool thing, because we have variants of each asset as well, I'll just randomly select one from the list. So this specific asset, it has actually 6 variants of itself. So I'm just plugging this path and then adding the number here, which is just randomly generated based on the point number. As you can see here, we're just going to fetch random asset as we go. And now when we create our instancer node and we plug all the assets together inside, you can see here we have a bunch of assets and everything works just as intended. So we can go along and create a rail track. So for the rail track, I get a bunch of assets from people that work in the scene before, specifically this little metal clip, kind of wooden bar and metal bar. I got my HeightField and I just projected that screenshot from Google Maps because I really like that highway and I really want to replicate exactly the same way the rail track. So I just created a curve which follows the highway perfectly. I used Ray node to push it down on my HeightField so it follows the elevation difference in the HeightField itself. And now for each section of my curve, I create a bunch of different points and lines, and I use those lines to create more curves. And using chain SOP node, you can easily just create this like continuous model of your rail, which is very, very handy. And then using the same curve we created prior, you can see here I'm just adding a little bit of jitter, so just tiny, tiny amount. And I use it to populate it with my planks. And then for the side metal clips, the same curves, just exporting them as a points. And now I'm instancing for each point, I'm instancing metal clip and I'm instancing my wooden bar. So again, like this entire train track is done in USD context, which is pretty cool. But also, because everything is procedural inside Houdini, you can just draw your curve and everything will just work. I mean, there's a little bit thing that we don't. Everything will just work. And now the main guest of this presentation, the train. So I got it as a BGO file, and as I mentioned before, it's Apex rigged, and I don't really know much about Apex. I will show you some things, but I don't really know. It's on content library. Please go if you're curious about animation. Please go enjoy. But the whole idea here is that we basically run this little solver here, which is also got from external artists. And in that solver, we can plug the speed parameter. And that speed parameter will be composed into specific attribute, which we will use inside the solver to figure out how fast the wheels should be turning. So that's the whole idea of the solver, is just to match your desired speed in units per, meters or hours to just the actual rotation of the wheels. And then we use the curve that we created earlier to just kind of guide our train asset to use it. And to make it happen, we need to use some Apex trickery, and it's Apex trickery, I guess. I'm sorry. But the final idea is that we have just our train that's following our curve, and we can basically select the speed that we wanted, and everything will just work fine, which is great. Now for the camera, in the same subnetwork, I'll just pack my train and kind of kill my geometry, leaving just one single point, and I'll use that point, which is just basically the center of my train, to scatter my camera upon. So what I will do, I'll import that point into my LOP network, and I will just randomize its position, because right now that point is perfectly traveling my train. I'll just add a little bit of jittering. You can see here is just a little bit, just kind of, pitching back and forth. And I'll add much more noise on the vertical and horizontal, like actual physical position of that point. And now I'll use transform by SOP points, LOP node, to position my camera on that point that we just created. As you can see now, just a heads up, we have our train, it's moving, our wheels are rotating, everything's perfect. The rail track is also perfectly following the train. We have all the assets scattered already on the background, and we have the camera, which is kind of randomized to kind of mimic this like little handshake of the guy trying to follow the train that goes 250 units per second a minute or whatever. So yeah, so we are almost there, pretty much. So we can do some lighting now. Right now, if I just create a simple physical sky node, and I'll create, instead of dome light, I will switch to atmospheric. You can see it looks okay, but it's not really, there. And we can add a bunch of details by just including little cloud noise. So as you can see here, if I zoom my camera away, I just generated basically just a simple noise and applied it to the grid and make it transparent. And those are basically clouds that cast shadow on my geometry. So you can see here the difference is quite drastic. And the thing is, in real life, of course, like we have clouds, and those clouds, they always cast shadows. But like when you browse Google Maps, it's really easy to forget about it. So it's just something to keep in mind that like you have to always, remember that physical things are physical. And here how it looks, I have one layer which is just noise, and the second layer is the same noise, but just stretched. Those are just two simple grids, literally one MTLX noise on top, pretty simple stuff. And now when we go to actual render with the camera physical sky and with the shadows from the clouds, you can see here it looks okay. But I don't like how train is very dark. It makes sense from a realistic standpoint. The train will be dark because like it's overexposed in the background. But I decided, we can just add some fake lights just to evaluate, like kind of outline our train a bit better. Also, I wanted to like tell a little story about the like a cabin, so I added a small light there. You can see here, that light is actually so bright, it's illuminating my track, which is not very physically possible. This light is brighter than the sun, which is unfortunate from physical standpoint, but from artistic standpoint, I guess it's fine. And for the night scene, very similarly, I just have my dome light. I add a little bit of directional light just to elevate my shadows here. A little bit of physical sky just to kind of tint the sky. You can see a little bit kind of here. The same light, it's a bit less dark, it's less bright than the previous one. And then I have some lights for the front. And the same light we use to kind of outline the train for the daylight. I just positioned on the other side to get this nice rim light. And the cool thing about Solaris, once again, we have this little thing called context option editor. So in this kind of environment, when you have two options of like dark and night, or if you just need to switch between the two, it's really nice to use this little window. Basically what we'll do, you'll create those attributes. So those are just like sliders, right? And you can plug those sliders into your actual nodes. So here you can see I have my switch. And if I would like to switch to my night light setup, which will require multiple switches to activate in the same time, I can just plug them all into one single attribute, which is composed into one single window, and I can just like boop, and we're a night scene. So I forgot about it. I was like, what's happening? Now as we got our render, we got our lights happening, it's time to do some compositing. So I created a bunch of AUVs, specifically mostly of them are just cryptomats and light LPE tag AUVs, but I also got this little position mask, which I really needed because I wanted to change the mountain on the back. So you can see here, this mountain, I just looked too bright. So I got my UV AOV. I multiplied by cryptomat of my terrain. So you can see I just selected the height in the crypto node. Multiplying by the depth to select just the back part of the mountain. And basically, I'll have this little path that has just the mountain and just the UV of that mountain on the back. And I created a simple texture, just a green kind of shade. And I use UV sample inside Copernicus to sample that texture on that UV. So it follows my mountain perfectly. And then using hard light mode in my blend node, I just added on top just to darken those areas and kind of make more profound kind of shadows. And now it's time to add some bloom and glow because we're doing compositing and we need to just elevate everything. As you can see here, I'm actually adding 2 different glows, one for only the terrain area, one for sky. And I also fixing my saturation here because everything got overblown. And now the cool part. So as you can see here, we don't really have the fancy sky that we saw in the render because the sky was fake. What? We actually replace it, and we can replace sky inside Copernicus. So for that, we don't have a very straightforward kind of process because Copernicus is not designed for compositing. I'm just showing you that like it's possible. But what you can do, you can generate this massive sphere. You can see here, I just scale it down for you to see like the bounds of the sphere. Sphere is actually massive. And that sphere, it has UV attribute. And we will import camera from LOPS, and we will sample that UV attribute from from the inside of the sphere to get this little rectangle. So what's happening, like that sphere again, like it's massive. It's like 30,000 units in radius or whatever. So entire scene, everything we have, camera, everything is inside that sphere, and we just sample this little section which is visible to camera in a given point. And we have this like, it looks like one uniform color, but it's actually like it's a little gradient of UV attribute. And now when we get our HDRI from Polyhaven, thank you Polyhaven, we can use UV sample and sample that HDRI directly on the UV kind of rectangle we got. And now if we let it play, because our camera is changing and we're sampling different areas of the sphere, our HDRI is also moving. And it's going to perfectly match your camera movement, which is great. But the thing is, in Copernicus right now, we don't have motion blur nodes. So I was really like, oh, I need to motion blur it a little bit. So what I did, I just grabbed the same UV pass, I changed it a little bit using UV transform to kind of make it more centralized here. And I just generated a single point, which is just 2D layer inside COPS, is just one single point. And I sample in that point on that UV pass, and I import it into SOPs. And now hold on. So in SOPs, when I use scatter nodes, I'll have some points only on the bright parts of the image. Because like even though it looks like an image, from Houdini's standpoint, that's actually a volume. So we have volume with like no values everywhere except just in the middle, right there. So when we scatter points, we'll have points only there. I will then pack it and calculate velocity attribute of those points. And I will transfer the reverse of that velocity to a bigger plane, and I will rasterize that plane back in COPS. So basically now I have velocity path of the how fast my camera is moving and which direction is it moving. And I can plug it into strict blur node, which will generate a little bit of motion blur. And here you can see you can control how much motion blur you have by just multiplying your length of your UV pass. And that's how it looks in action. So you can see when camera goes down, the motion blur kind of goes up, everything kind of works. And it's like a super cheap way to get motion blur, kind of headache. But again, the fact it's possible is kind of mind-blowing to me. I don't know, that's great. And then we just go back to blend layer. We replace the sky using depth mask. A little bit of just trickery for the shadows to elevate them a little bit on the train. Then for some extra effects, I just select the brightest spots I have on my frame, and I invert them, and I use them to generate this like little bokeh using the kernels I got from Compositing Pro website. And I'll just add it back to kind of add some inside reflections in the lens of the camera. And yeah, then some chromatic aberration, lens distortion, just some little tricks on top, and overall kind of contrast fix, and that's it. We have our little train that goes happily through desert. We have some bokeh happening. Sky is fully replaced. Fortunately, the video is like 480p or whatever, so you can't really see all the details, but yeah. And then for the same shot, just at night, we have a bit more AOVs because we have more lights. You can see I've changed those lights drastically, kind of multiplying my headlight to like 500 to get the actual like volumetric cone here. Then the same thing for the sky. This time, instead of using just one HDRI, as you can see here, I already have a bunch of stars. It already works kind of well. I'll just add more stars and points using a scatter shape node. And I also got this very nice picture of the moon, which actually was done in turn like by a person from SideFX. Like it was shot like on an iPhone or something. That's crazy. It's probably AI generated or whatever, like, you know, like on the Samsung. Anyway, so yeah, then I just UV positioned in the sky, added some glow, mixed everything together, added a little bit of like blue glow to the horizon line, combined everything together as a final sky replacement layer, and the same thing, just elevated my shadows, kind of tried to match the exposure of my sky and my plate together just a little bit. As you can see here, added the same bokeh effect. You can see here it's very nice, it's very warm because of the night scene. And yeah, same thing, chromatic aberration, a little bit of lens distortion, blur on the edges, and that's it. Now we have the night scene version. And that's it. Yeah, thank you so much. And now, I hope, yeah, we have some time for questions, so sure. Yes, please.
So I saw in that initial train scene you had like a really nice smoke simulation. So why wasn't that on the preview?
So fortunately, in order to have a very nice smoke simulation, you need to have a lot of voxels. And as far as I remember, that very nice smoke simulation was around 80 gigabytes in cache. So I've just decided not to point users to that because like it was kind of outside of the main idea of the scene.
Yeah, whoever did that probably needs to clean it up.
Yes, please.
How long were the render times per frame?
Oh, I actually don't remember because I rendered in batch on the render farm. I don't recall, I don't know exactly per frame, but I think in total it was like 2 hours or like an hour and a half. It was quite fast.
It was XPU?
Yeah, it was CPU. Yeah.
You use any denoising?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you have so many assets in the scene, you have to use some denoising. But the thing is, like, because we're using point instancer for the assets, it's very fast. It's very snappy. If you go to the viewport, it's like 100 FPS. You can have like 16 million assets. But because those assets are basically just copies of itself, it's very fast for your GPU. It's very fast for your rendering as well. Yeah.
Were you pre-compiling any shaders before that? Or
because I was rendering with CPU, I didn't. But yeah, in the stage when I was doing kind of R&D, yeah, I pre-compile my shaders. Of course, it's making my XPU experience a bit better.
Did you use the proxy meshes with the ray distance? So like the further away the assets were, you use the designated version?
I thought about it, and it was actually slower for me to figure out the distance per each point and cool like assets. Basically what I did before, I actually did like, there was a camera frostum and I was killing assets outside my camera frostum, but it was actually slower for me to find assets outside the camera frostum per each frame than just like bulk push everything. And that's why, yeah, there's no that kind of optimization. It's just like, I just go with everything. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. It was
Thank
really
you.
impressive. And I'm curious, the train trail that was made in Sol, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it was instanced, and then when you bring this asset to LOP, and is it still preserved as instance?
So what I did, I created my curve and set of points in SOPs, and that's what I brought to LOPS. So the actual instancing, the actual creation, the actual asset is done in with USD inside LOPS.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all USD asset. It's all preserved. Yeah.
Thank you.
Were you doing the frostum checking thing before or after your instance?
I
You do it on points and then.
Yeah, I did it like I was just killing points before the instancing. Yes.
That was slow.
That was actually slower. Yeah. Like it's very fast. You can verify if you download from the content library. It's really good. I mean, just it depends on your machine. But just don't call me on it. Yeah. Okay, I think we're good then. Thank you so much.